Hi, Phil. That one sounds good. Hey,
Hey,
Phil.
Dean.
All right, Phil. I've got a hypothetical that I want to just sort of drop you right into. But before I
Sure.
do, let folks know a little bit about you.
Yeah, Phil Charland. I am in transition right now, most recently CRO with School Status, a PSG equity-backed business focused on the K-12 market. Most of my experience, last 20, 25 years, have worked my way up from SDR to account executive to regional manager, national sales manager, and as I shared, most recently CRO. So come up
Right.
through sales, and yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Okay. So answer me this then: whether it's um, walking into a new employer and a new company, or walking into like a new client, new company, uh, on day one, right? Monday, 9 o'clock, first day there. What's the dream scenario you might walk into, and what's the nightmare scenario that you might walk into?
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully you've been able to assess some of this through the interview
Uh-huh.
process. But I think, for me, Dean, I very much consider myself a people first leader. And so
Mhm.
for me, that's really about, building, developing, elevating talent. And so, dream scenario first day is you really confirm as you're meeting with your direct reports that you have a hunch, that you have
Right.
a top notch, really incredible leadership team reporting to you. That's something obviously you need to validate over time. Worst case scenario is that frankly, you walk in and maybe you had some hunch about this, but you realize just from an overall talent perspective in terms of your direct reports, there perhaps are some gaps or some concerns that you have. So those would be kind of the things that would get me maybe most excited and confident about the new role, and what might make me a little bit nervous.
What's the nightmare?
Yeah, I mean, I think the nightmare is, yeah, both not having really strong talent, but then I guess the other thing I think of often is like, you know for me on the executive team, very much kind of need to have a first team mentality with those folks.
Right.
Same
Yeah.
is true, of course, of your direct reports. That team that you're leading very much has to have a first team mentality. And in some organizations, you just don't necessarily see that. Whether there's considerable friction between functions, a lack of cohesion and alignment, um, or just some baggage that has happened well before you arrive that has created maybe, unspoken conflict even, across your leadership team.
All right. And Neil, hi. Nice to meet you again. So, Neil, can you tell folks a little bit about you? I think we lost Neil. All right. Fair enough then. So, um, Phil, I have another question. Okay. I have many actually, but staying with that same hypothetical of dream and nightmare scenario. Okay. So that was day one. Let's jump ahead to day 90 and tell me if this ever happens. And if it does, like what it is. So it's day 90 and you're talking to the CEO or whoever, the board, and then someone says, hey, like, when bringing you in, we understood, what the value prop for having you here was, and, but I got to tell you, the real aha moment for me, now that I've seen you here for 90 days is what? What do they
Yeah,
realize beyond just like, hey, he can help us grow sales?
yeah, yeah. Probably two things come to mind. One, I'm always trying to be as aggressive with just learning and my natural curiosity. So I think, coming up to speed quickly on the business, I think would be a great compliment. I also think, you really, as a CRO, drive the culture across your combined teams. And so, yeah, I think there are quick cultural wins. Maybe you're coming into a healthy culture, perhaps you're not, but either way, I think just in that first 90 days, the balance of building culture internally while also ensuring you're learning externally, right? Getting out with customers,
Right.
leading from the field, not just sitting back behind your Salesforce dashboards in your office, thinking you're, ramping up. So, I think a combination of those things, and, just being able to identify, yeah, you're the right leader to push our culture forward. And, we value your ability to kind of come up to speed quickly on both the team, the business, and customers. That's, to me, a great feeling if you have that conversation then.
All right. And Neil, hey.
Hi there. Hopefully you can hear me this time. I don't know if I can hear you.
Yes,
It's
and see you. You're moving around again. Hey, so you heard me sort of pick on Phil, and so now it's my turn to pick on you. First, tell folks a little bit about you, and then I want you to talk about what the dream and nightmare scenario is for a day one when you start like a new thing. I think we lost Neil again. Oh well.
I can't hear anything.
Can't hear me? Okay. All right. Let's try this. Okay. Phil, we're just going to keep going. So let's move to a different scenario, okay? Yeah. Someone invited you to be the keynote speaker. And the audience, 250 people, they've all come up through the ranks, and they all are just about to start their first ever CRO gig, right? Sure. Job, client, whatever, right? Tomorrow's their first day as a CRO in any way. So you're looking at these folks and you're saying, I got to help these folks. I'm going to give them a little talk. So you're talking to this audience and you're saying, look, first thing I want to tell you, most of the companies you're ever going to work with as a CRO just don't understand what?
Good question. Yeah, I think there's a number of things I could share there, but maybe what just comes top of mind to me, maybe two things. One, I would say, a lot of folks talk about really important that sales and marketing are aligned, right? There's cohesion there. I'm a firm believer, as a CRO, especially a full stack CRO, you need alignment across every functional team that is, involved in kind of the full customer life cycle. And so that's a huge just leadership task to ensure everything from the way that those leaders and teams work together, how we think about the customer journey, is really critical that it's seamless for them, kind of across interfacing, whether it's the handoff from sales to CS to the way customer support or services team works, as well as with marketing. All of those teams need to be in harmony, both around ICP, validated messaging. But I think the very specific point I might make there, Dean, is I do think a lot of companies make the mistake of, obviously they're focused on top line performance, growth. Often, depending on the stage of business, it's very oriented towards new customer acquisition. I think especially for a scaling SaaS business, say north of 15 to 20 million, customer success truly is a growth engine, and there's truly a compounding effect of top line growth when that's done well. And if you think about CS just not as only a retention function, but also really huge opportunity depending on the product portfolio for upsell, cross-sell, and expansion growth. To me, in most SaaS businesses, that's where your compounding kind of growth effect of a subscription business model occurs. You can't take your eye off and need balance with acquisition growth as well. But that's just something that comes to mind. And I think especially in this current environment, you are seeing more businesses put more of a premium on that ARR growth potential from their CS team.
And then next question, as they get started in this job, what are they going to be the most surprised by, you think, in their first ever
Yeah,
CRO, thing
yeah,
versus what they've done
yeah,
before?
yeah. Maybe it's not a complete surprise because a lot of CROs, whether they're coming from, coming up through marketing or coming up through sales, they've probably had a number to deliver on, and pretty tight metrics in terms of just the performance environment. But I always think, just for a new CRO, it's like life is good when you're making the number, but frankly, it's a stressful role, like regardless of your performance position, because when you're making the number, you're constantly trying to stay ahead, ensure you have enough pipeline, you're thinking a quarter or two ahead. So that's always stressful. And of course, if you're behind on the number, um, you're ultimately accountable for it. And I would say maybe the lesson or the surprise is that there's a lot that you can control and
Right.
impact as a CRO, but there's also a lot out of your control. And so there are things you can influence, out of your direct span of control, and that's really critical. That I go back to that first team mentality, the way you can work with your finance leader, other senior leaders in the business. It can really help if you have that cross-functional ability to influence things. But there is so much out of your control, whether it's market factors, potentially delays in product release, or other challenges. And so I think being mindful of that and ensuring stay focused on the things you can impact, and you got to be aware and understand the context of those that you maybe can't as directly, but you can't waste too much time, energy, or effort on those things in some cases.
And what do you think as you're sort of being ushered off this stage, right? Some intern is saying like, "Okay, you're done, get out,"
Yeah, yeah.
and bringing up the music like at the Oscars,
Getting the
right?
hook.
Yeah, getting the old hook.
Yep.
And but you want to make sure you tell this audience like one last thing, right? And it's no, when it comes to finding where you're gonna land next time around, the one lesson you have for choosing is what?
Um, yeah, for me, it's a lot of it is culture, right?
Yeah,
And I'm really, again, as a people first leader, you're only as good as the quality of the folks on your team,
right.
up, down, sideways. And so all of that, um, really is the ethos of what your company culture is. And so with that, look for that to be a priority for the CEO. There are some CEOs who very much care about building strong cultures focused on continuous improvement,
Right.
very customer centric cultures. To me, that's really, really important. Always would look for that to be clear as you're moving through the interview process, that matters, and that it's sometimes a feeling based assessment, right? It's hard to quantify, but as you talk to multiple folks through the process, and you ask good questions about that, or even without asking questions, you can really start to glean, I think, at least an initial impression of that culture. And I'll say it again, but I think I like to get the sense that, especially as a CRO, that my peer, executive leadership team has an incredibly strong first team mentality, because I believe when that is the case, that cascades down to the entire organization and has really healthy impact on generally the overall culture of the business. So,
Yeah.
um, obviously the business's performance trajectory, and if it hasn't been great, you want to understand, do you think you have the experiences and the skill to go turn that? But yeah, at the end of the day, Dean, for me, it's really about culture and the people.
All right. So let's imagine that they finally got you off stage. You're
Yeah,
a chatty talker, but
with
they
a
finally
little
managed to do it.
resistance. Yeah,
And so now, you walk out, and it's, this is a convention. So you walk out onto the floor with the booths and the potential
yeah,
customers out there, and you're having your conversations and stuff. And as you're talking to companies that might be sort of your next employer or your next, like, consulting client, right?
yeah.
What do you find when you're talking to companies in 2025, what do they tend to overrate, and what do they still underrate that you think they'd be better served by focusing on?
Good question.
What do they think is important but is not, and what do they think is not as important, or it's just a given but really needs TLC?
Yeah, I guess what I would say is really important. It's a tough selling environment, right? There's a lot of macroeconomic conditions. There's reluctance in the buying process here in 25. I think it's harder than ever in some cases to stand out. We have competitive markets. We have very very competitive and, like I said, challenging buying environment. A couple things. I think ideal customer profile, or ICP. We hear it all the time, and in my experience, it's critical that a business is really continuously thinking about ICP. So take an ed tech company, for example. They may think, hey, we can sell to any K-12 school district in North America. That's probably not the best approach, right? Because there's probably certain enrollment segments, certain geographic segments of that market that perhaps are best fit for that company. And rather than having kind of this very broad definition of ICP, to me, really at every phase of the business growth, I think being very zeroed in on that and unified again and aligned from marketing to sales to CS. Who do we believe are our best customers? And by best customer, I really think about it from the framework of which customers can we deliver the most value with our solution. And so I think more and more companies, are even mature companies that maybe have gone adrift with being very focused on ICP, I think are coming back to that. And maybe just to add on to that, like I would say in this environment, like I said, I think standing out is hard, but I think it's achievable. And I think, to do so, sometimes in your market, as every company is zigging, it's time to zag. And, being bold and being different is often very, very critical. And so working on what is that positioning messaging that does help you differentiate, and stand out. I think that's really important. And coming back, I guess, to your question, what do I think is overrated? And this is an ongoing debate for many years. But I think as you think about how you develop like top of funnel or outbound like lead gen, it's a balance of quantity and quality, right? How are we getting enough outreach to fill the funnel? But quality really matters. And I think in today's environment, I would lean more towards quality and personalization of outreach versus just blasting a generic message, maybe light personalization with some AI tools. That gets seen through pretty quickly. Everyone is doing that. So again, if they're zigging, let's zag and maybe spend a little more time. And obviously there's a plethora of tools like ChatGPT and other more specific GTM AI applications that can really help you both hone, that you're sending the message to the right ICP, but then help craft a very personalized message. And I think, slowing down to speed up in that regard is something a lot of companies would be, wise to do in this market conditions.
That's a good one. All right. This is sort of I got another question for you. It's a tiny bit vague, so it gives you lots of room. But what do you think defines selling in 2025 versus earlier years?
Yeah, I think this has always been true, but I think the critical nature of it today is there are still businesses that lead with products and features. And at the end of the day, unless you deeply, deeply understand the processes, the perspective, the challenges, the opportunities that your prospects and customers have, you've got to be able to create value beyond your product, value in the sales process of being able to share insights, refer to how others like that customer may have solved the challenge, push the envelope of maybe that prospect's thinking of how a problem could be solved.
Right.
That's always been important, but I think never has it been more critical than in today's environment. And so really having a sales team that's naturally curious, that understands the discovery process is ongoing, not just in the sales process, right? It's not an upfront one-time event. It should be a continuous discovery process, including with your CS team, because the needs of our prospects and customers are going to change, evolve. So much is rapidly, changing. And so I think, again, overused term, but to truly be that trusted advisor that can really understand, the use case and frankly craft a compelling business case around, why this solution can make a difference for that specific executive and their business responsibilities.
So when you're talking to companies about like your next opportunity, not clients, but like for your own career, opportunity, what's like a green flag and what's a red flag that might come up in the conversation?
Yeah.
Like what's great if they happen to mention it?
So here's what I would say. I think green flag. I do look for. I think it's important that there's like a repeatability of your go-to-market motions. Whether you're just looking at your sales process, is it kind of clear that they're grounded in some methodology? I frankly don't necessarily care what methodology that is, but like, is there a consistent sales process? Is it clear from one stage to the next? What's the exit criteria? All of those things, like look for that foundation to be in place ideally. I think in the absence of that, perhaps a red flag, if you have got a team of 20 or 40 sellers out there all running their own motions, not looking to create a team of robotic sellers, but right. I'm a big fan often of ensuring that playbooks have captured for each team, kind of best practices, clarity on the motion. So I do look for like evidence of artifacts of like, hey, do you guys use playbooks? Are they constantly evolving, or did you develop them 2 years ago and they're kind of collecting, dust on a shelf? So probing on some of those things. Now, what I will say, Dean, is, in some cases they may not be as consistent or repeatable with their sales process, and that's an opportunity for you, as a CRO to come in and drive change there that can be really impactful. So, I think there's the flip side of every challenge that you find in the business. But that would be one that, depending on the maturity of the business, I might question just why that hasn't been addressed maybe sooner, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily a red flag that a company has a problem. It's a red flag if they don't think they have a problem.
I would agree. That's really right. Well said, and that's I think the essence of what I was trying to get to. That makes sense.
Yeah. All right. So thank you for being here. By the way, this has been fantastic. Let's wrap it up. Who should be talking to you, or these days, and how should they get to you?
Yeah. Really open to. I love to talk go to market with anyone. A lot of my experience has been within private equity backed businesses. So frequently on a weekly basis, talking to folks within PE. I welcome opportunities to talk to CEOs out there across vertical market industries, and love having conversations with early stage founders in terms of their vision for their business. How they're thinking about go to market and the various phases of that as they continue through their journey. So those are some of the folks that I enjoy speaking to, daily and weekly. And I would welcome anyone to reach out if they'd like to connect and have a quick conversation. So.
And on LinkedIn is the best way?
Yeah, sorry. LinkedIn, best way to reach me. I should see it right there. And yeah, feel free to reach out, and happy to talk.
All right. Phil, thanks for being here. This has been fantastic. Folks,
Yeah,
thanks for
appreciate it.
watching, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Bye.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it.